think successful inclusion, it is understanding that it's, it's what I describe as a mountain with no top, right? There is no end to it. And I feel like it's been, in many circles addressed as a problem that has some sort of, immediate or policy-based solution. But successful inclusion exists when I think you have an organization that really comprehends the enormity of the task before you and the type of investment that it takes. An investment in mapping the community that organization is meant to represent, actively engaging and including members of that community, changing the model if you have to, understanding that it might be the nature of an organization or the nature of its approach that might actually be excluding some and not perhaps being as representative as it could. And conversely, also looking at the other side of inclusion. Like I know we want to talk about what successful inclusion looks like, but I think the motivation to move towards, really productive and active inclusion is if you understand what the, what the repercussions are. And sometimes diversity and inclusion, especially in an organizational context, is described as it's a bit of a virtue, right? You do your best. It's like cultural spinach. Like you eat some if you can, and it's good for you, but if you miss a couple of meals, big deal. But the reality of inclusion is that when you look at the opposite end of that, it isn't just about some people feeling left out. Depending on the type of institution or organization you are, the opposite of inclusion is actually a silencing of audiences. It's a silencing of people. And built within that is a potential for social and sort of a structural violence that can be committed. So that's the present state where we're at right now. So successful inclusion is the sheer opposite of that. I think one of the most frustrating components of the diversity conversation is the passivity of it. As Canadians, on a national context, we use the word multiculturalism. We used it in the province of BC a lot. And that's, it's nothing to actually pat yourself on the back for. I mean, I come from a region in Vancouver that is always, self-congratulatory about our diversity. And that is the equivalent of wearing a multicolored shirt, right? So what? The inclusion is the component of it that's active, that says that these are not only diverse people, but also people that feel like they're actually a part of the wider conversation, right? And that's the part where, there's also, I think, a lot of work to be done, because it's one thing to say that, it's great that for the institutions we have, even on the government level, that, there's additional funding now, that, we're feeling more bolstered than we ever have before, and the sector's feeling, really strengthened. And we're saying we're going to invite in, applications from anybody, and we're going to invite in interest from anybody. And it was really telling, actually, Alicia, I think you pointed this out, was that during Minister Melanie Joly's, speaking engagement, there was that question that came in via text that said, as a visible minority, should we apply? The fact that that question needed to be asked, right, actually says that inclusion's not happening, right? An invitation is the lowest form of engagement, the lowest. And active inclusion is miles away from that. But I think there's a huge advantage in, this quote-unquote old guard, the people that we do have in the room. And I don't think we can necessarily discount that, because this is a massive swath of people in very privileged spaces. And, and to add to another point you were making around who's having this conversation, right? When you're not necessarily counting on the new leadership to make all the changes, when you're not necessarily counting on the diverse people to have the diverse conversation, you can leverage your privileged positions and the power that you wield to create sweeping changes,